So in Dubai, for example, where was in charge of the leadership development, we would have 40 different restaurants. And I always told the restaurant managers, the way I check out your leadership style is to go to your restaurant on your day off. And I want to see, how's your restaurant run when you're not there?
We have Andreas and Victoria Roos-Olsson joining us today. Thank y'all for being here. I know, Paul, you've known this family couple for a few years now. You did the Nomor deal in 2019. Andreas was the CEO of Nomor. And Victoria, you are an author with Franklin Covey, so we might talk more to you than Andreas today. But you needed a ride to get here. So thanks for doing your part.
Thank you.
Yeah, my first question for you is, did you also write a book, or are you just freeloading?
No. I mean, exactly. Hey, there's a lot behind the book.
Yeah.
All the stories about me that Patrick can tell you about, who read the book.
No, so I really appreciate you guys being here. So, of course, Andreas and I worked together on the Nomor transaction. But Victoria, this is the first time we got an opportunity to meet. So I want to start
lovely to
with
meet you.
Lovely to meet you. What are you doing here in the U.S.?
So I am working with leadership development.
Okay.
And for Franklin Covey.
Yep.
And I do everything from keynotes to executive coaching, working with executive teams, first level leaders, everything like that.
And so you two, what month did you move to the States? You moved was it in the middle of 2020? Is that when you guys came?
So I came a bit earlier.
Okay.
But Andreas, for obvious reasons, was staying behind before we got settled and all of that. And then, so I've been here a bit longer, yes.
And how long were you working with Franklin Covey in the Nordics before you came here?
Yes.
Okay.
I was the managing director for Franklin Covey in Sweden.
Right on. Okay. So what prompted you two to come to the U.S.?
So when I did write the book, which I wrote together with two of my colleagues, they actually really wanted me to come over here. And we've been fortunate. We've traveled a lot in our family.
Yep.
We've lived in 10 different countries and worked in different countries. So we were pretty excited to see, the next step for our family before our girls sort of graduate and move off to college. And it was a wonderful opportunity for us to come over. So, yeah.
And you're enjoying Atlanta?
Yes, very much.
Now, how did you choose Atlanta? Or did they say, Victoria, we want you in Atlanta? Or?
So they did want me on the East Coast, which is also really good for us because it makes it easier for Europe. So, for example, I'm doing a workshop next week with European and Asian leaders, which means I start at 4 a.m. in the morning. I mean, it's all virtual now. So we actually had the pick between Atlanta and New York.
Okay.
And we love New York. My sister has lived there for many years, but you also love to play golf. We love the warm climate and, I think Atlanta is a lovely place. We live north of Atlanta, a small little town called Alpharetta, and it's perfect to raise a family, I think.
That's fantastic. And you guys been here about a year and you learned English. You came here. You
Isn't it amazing?
It is great.
That's
I'm
amazing.
very impressed. Patrick, what do you got?
Did you have to pick the most humid spot on the planet?
Yeah, it is very different than where you came from. This weather is a little bit...
Remember, we did live 4 years in Dubai, so we've been adjusted to the heat, but the humidity here, of course, it's a bit worse. Yeah.
Back us up. So before pest control, before Franklin Covey, y'all's background's hospitality, right? Hotels. So was it Dubai y'all met?
Oh, prior to that, actually. So we met at the Hotel School The Hague, which is, essentially one of the 5 best hotel schools in the world, sponsored by Heineken, which is a good thing, I would say. So Victoria was ahead of me. I'm a slow starter, so I was a few years behind, even though I'm older. And that's where we met. And we've been A good pair ever since then.
Yes. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to combine our careers, and we've sort of traveled and explored the world through our different jobs, really.
Yeah. So you guys, though, you met in school, but then you literally worked together as you went to different places?
No, I mean, we've tried it all. Like different, we did work together in Copenhagen, in Denmark. Yeah. But so the first thing that happened when we sort of fell in love was that I had applied for and I got accepted 3 weeks after we were like an item to China.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, okay. So I think I met the love of my life, and now here's this management internship. So that's how we started out our
China, Germany.
Yeah, because then you went to Germany.
Then we had Brussels, England.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of distance
For
relationship terms. In our in the overall relationship. But we always worked in different. Even though we were in the same hotel, we worked in different departments.
We worked once in the same hotel.
Only once.
Yeah, and that was Copenhagen.
a pre-opening.
Okay.
Yeah, for Hilton.
How was that working together?
It was good. I mean, we were in different departments. I think, you know, what happened was we managed to keep it so sort of discreet, so no one really knew. And then it was like the big staff party to like once the hotel was open, and everyone had such a great party that night. And then the big gossip is happening the day after. And someone went, "Oh my God, I saw Andreas from finance and Victoria from learn. They were kissing on the dance floor." And someone was like, they live together. It's like,
what a spoiler.
It's like the morning after the holiday party. All the truth comes out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. So when did you get involved with Franklin Covey?
So I actually did read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People at the early start of my career. And I'm like, okay, I'm a fan. And then when we moved to Dubai, and that actually is a fun story in itself, because we had moved to Scotland, and Andreas here is not only looking for his own jobs, but he's like the career coach for the entire family. Mm-hmm. So he had been looking out for jobs for me as well. Mm-hmm. And we've moved to Scotland, and I'm getting settled. I came a few months later with the girls, and sort of in our apartment unpacking. Andreas is calling us, and I've just spoke to this consultant, and she has this amazing job for you in Dubai. I'm like, okay, well, that's good, but we're here now. No. She's going to call you in 2 minutes, right? So I'm like, okay. And then the two of you managed to convince.
We had a plan. We had a good plan.
The headhunter and Andrea.
A couple of drinks. Yeah. No, a couple of plane tickets.
Honey, we're going for dinner. Candlelight.
So long story short, we ended up moving to Dubai instead. Okay. That's how we ended up there. Mm-hmm. And my company there, my organization, were partnering up with Franklin Covey. Okay. And at that point, coming from Europe, Franklin Covey was not that big there at that time. I'm like, oh, there's an organization. And I started working, using their material in the organization. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of leadership development, and that's how I got connected with Franklin Covey. Okay. And then I sort of stayed in touch, because I'm like, yeah, this is it.
Now, how big is Franklin Covey?
So we are the world's largest private leadership development organization. Mm-hmm. So we're fairly big. We exist in 147 different countries around the world. So it's really a global organization, and fairly big in the US. I think we're about 120 consultants working full time. And then, but we also do a lot of. We've gone through a transformation like many organizations in the past 10 years, I'd say. So we really do support lots of organizations within the organization, giving them a lot of the tools and materials so they can use it for themselves as well.
Now, my question for you, Victoria. Mm-hmm. What was the origin of this book?
I've always felt strongly for the first level leader. Like, I think it's such an important job, and it's rarely something that most leaders actually don't get any preparation for. And I think, you've all been in pest control, and, like there's technical aspects of your job. And you're both in finance, so you learn, you go to school, and this is how it works. And if you start in pest control, you go out and someone will teach you technically. that works for like most things in our careers, apart from the role of being a leader. So I don't know, what would be your guess? What do you think is the average age when most leaders get their first job in leadership? Like when you get your first promotion into leadership?
Well, Andreas was a slow starter, so maybe a little older for him. But I don't know. Patrick, venture a guess.
25, just thinking my background, but I don't know. I don't know.
No. So the average age, according to research from Harvard, is 30. So I would say, like, I agree with you. I think maybe within pest control, within hospitality, it's probably even younger. Mm-hmm. But what do you think on average is the average age when leaders get their first actual training in leadership development?
I'm still waiting.
Like 40? No.
42.
Yeah.
So it's like a 12-year gap, right? And I think that's so important, because what other profession would you do that? Oh, hey, congratulations. You're now a nurse. Try it out for 12 years. And if you didn't kill someone in the meanwhile, we're going to give you a little bit of training. And I think that's what we do to a lot of leaders. So going back to your question, I think for me, it was always, because it's no real rocket science. There is certain skills that if you have them, if you get it, if you know and how to practice them, you can really make a difference for yourself as a leader, but also for the people you work with. Okay. So for me, that was a dream, to always write that book. And sometimes the magic comes, I'd taken a little bit of a time out from my role as a managing director. And I said, now I'm going to write this book. Okay. And then I wrote to my dear colleague, Scott, in Salt Lake City, where we have our head office. And I'm like, just so you know, I'm writing this book now. And he said, that's perfect, because that's the next book we're going to be writing. So, and that's how it happened. We decided to write it all together.
How long did it take the two of you to write this?
So it's not the two of us. I'd say, like, this is what I've learned now in the book writing business. Okay. It's a team of lots of people. And we're 3 authors. So Todd, our colleague, also joined us. I think from like the start, it's probably like a process of 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I've just started to write my next book. So I'm like, I wonder how long that's going to take. Yeah.
Do you have a working title yet?
The what?
Do you have a working title?
No, no. Well, I have a few different ideas.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about leadership training. So what do you mean by that? So let's say I'm a 30-year-old guy. I wish I were 30. Mm-hmm. And now I've been placed in the position of managing others. So how do you draw the distinction between, me being a manager and being trained as an actual leader of people?
So first of all, that's like an interesting concept we could have a long conversation about. Well, some people really love to go into depth, like management, leadership. We even debated when we were giving the title, should it be like an effective leader? And I must say, we use it, both of them in there. But I do think that, and what I've noticed, I said the audience was first level leaders. That's how we started. But we are working with executive committees, with these, even with CEOs on these critical practices. So I think, first of all, it's just like when you learn anything new, it's like getting the basic right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I say it's like the basics, in my colleagues go, Victoria, you can't call it basics, but it's sort of the fundamentals of like, make sure we get this right. So that was what we were trying to aim at in the book and in this course. Like, okay, here you are, you're 30, you got the promotion. Or let's say that you're 45 or 55 and you're doing this and you're like, actually, I feel a little bit at loss. It's not, it's going okay, but maybe it's not doing great. Mm-hmm. What is it that I can do? Easy practices that I can easily pick up that would actually have a great impact on the team that I lead.
Last night I was in the car and I got a call from a friend of mine in the industry. And so it was a business that we had sold years ago. And there's been a lot of different leadership changes. This is a rather large business. And the guy calls me up and says, okay, we've got a new manager at our organization and everyone's frustrated. And I said, okay, why is that? And he said, well, the new guy is going to, and he's a manager, is going to all of the frontline people, asking them, what's it like to work with this manager? What's it like to work with that manager? And all of the managers are just irate. They're all upset. This guy doesn't know anything. How dare he come in here and talk to our people? I mean, is this type of stuff that you work with? Are you training people how to deal with these sorts of intricacies of being a new manager in a new organization? And because you're a stranger, right? You're like a fish out of water. You come into an organization, there's 500 people below you. So how do you deal with stuff like that?
Well, so that's a really great example. And yes, certainly that's where we coach, leaders all the time. So if I'm understanding it correctly, he's actually the manager of these managers going directly to the front line. So that's a double-edged. I mean, there's some really good things about doing that. Yeah. And there are some things that can really scare your friends off, right?
Exactly.
Like, oh my God, what will they tell him?
Exactly.
And so if I were to coach that leader and really talk, because he has a really good reasoning for doing that. And I think it's really good, but it's also about setting the trust with the people that reports into him, right? Yeah. To really sit down and say like, all right, so I'm going to do this, but it's not.
Here's why I'm doing it.
Exactly. And I think we should never underestimate the importance of building trust in our relationships. And so I probably, would want to ask him to really consider like
how he communicates this
and what he'll gain from it.
So when you deal with, like in our industry, and obviously you've lived it because of your husband. So we'll have a lot of frontline employees, and then you might have a branch with a branch manager. I mean, what are some things that ownership can think about? And Andreas, this is a question for you because you've been at it for a long time. So, in our industry, we tend to develop talent internally, right? It's not a sexy business. You don't go to business school and say, I want to get into pest control. So you're taking frontline employees, you're turning them into branch managers, service managers, regional managers. Is there, if I were an owner of one of these businesses and you were sitting down with me, would you give me any sort of suggestions as to how do I think about putting together a formal program for raising these people up? I mean, what are some high-level thoughts you have?
I mean, first of all, it's every industry thinks that they're very unique. And while there are big differences between certain, like, you'll have the extremes. I think the pest control business is similar to hospitality business, to many other industries. And many leaders that are the leaders here, they're entrepreneurs, right? They got this because they were so excited. They started small and they've grown, and they're like, so there are a few typical traps that we fall into. And one would be that you look at that individual contributor and just think about how you yourself got promoted into leadership at your first role. Probably you did that individual contributor job really well. Right. You were enthusiastic, you were proactive, when you got the job done, right? And those are skills that are great to have, but they're not going to be the strongest skills necessarily for you as a leader. You'll still need them. Yeah. But I think the critical path, and which is what we talk about in the first chapter really, is how do I make that shift from being that great individual contributor into a great manager and a great leader. And it's not necessarily the same requirement that we need. So I do tell leaders, I tell senior leaders that very often one of your most important jobs is not what you think, like the strategy in the business. Yes, they're important, but it's actually to develop other leaders. So I would say, don't just look for who's my best individual contributor, but look for who is a really good leader, who is the one who can see everyone else. Because at the end of the day, you're not so interested in their individual contribution any longer. You're looking for their leadership skills. Yeah,
I think also that what we did was looking for competencies, write down the competencies that a manager or leader should have. So, and build on those. There's something that you need to, be able to lead a team in order to, have be able to handle conflict, doing the sales, order to speak to your big clients. What are the competencies that you need for that role? So you do competency-based learning, basically.
So you're saying, the two of you are saying, like, I always think about the classic example. You have somebody who's a phenomenal sales guy, right? He's just great. He's killing it. And then we're building a sales team and we say, okay, let's take this great sales guy and let's make him the sales manager. Yeah. And he's horrible at it. Just absolutely horrible at it. Yeah. In the pest control space, actually akin to what you just said, it doesn't matter what industry. You have these entrepreneurs that start businesses and they themselves have typically never had formal training in managing people. actually most of them are horrible managers. And I feel like a lot of privately held businesses growth is stunted just because if I'm an entrepreneur, I automatically wear all the hats, right? Now I'm the manager, I'm the CEO, I'm not a good manager. And I see this a lot in the industry. Do you ever think about, I mean, let's say I run Paul's pest control company. I'm not a great manager, never been formally trained. Should I be focusing on training and educating myself, or am I oftentimes better suited finding a manager that's not me and kind of stepping back and being more of a shareholder? And I'm talking about small business.
Yeah. And that's a challenge with small business,
right,
because you don't always have the luxury of saying, okay, I'm going to now, also employ this manager who's going to do all of that. I do think, and that's part of why I love doing what I do, is also, we might feel like, oh, it's not my thing. And I hate the people part of this, right? I just want to do the fun stuff. But just like you probably wouldn't, think twice about going to Farah and learning around the latest technologies, just to take a little bit of time out and see like, hey, what are a few skills that I could implement that at the end of the day is really going to raise the effectiveness of my organization? So see, just like any other skill that you would want to upskill on, like maybe you were an entrepreneur, but not that much into finances. You quickly learn that, okay, for me to grow, I need to learn this stuff.
Right.
And I would say the same goes for the CEO. Now, if you do that for the owner, and just start to because at the end of the day, everyone will look up to the owner and say, what is he or she doing? Yep. And I think we should not underestimate the value of being a role model, right? So even though it might not all come naturally to you, and which is fine, figures don't come naturally to everyone. There are different things, right? You can still learn. I think start with yourself just so you can have a certain ability of being a role model. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I find that many this is hard for them, right? It's like, oh, I hate that. And I don't really know. So just like you'd upskill in anything else, I definitely recommend you to do that. Having said that, you might want to also make sure that you have someone around you that is not the one that you think, okay, this is the best guy to, but really has that skill that really maybe is more interested in the actual leadership and management and will do that really well.
Andreas.
No, I totally agree. I think, that in order to, lead somebody else, you need to know thyself. That's the first command of leadership.
Right.
You need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And, we all have our favorite things to do and to execute during a day.
Yep.
And we have those things that's being procrastinated. And knowing those, the things that you push forward is I think is crucial for anybody who wants to lead somebody else.
So speaking of leading organizations, so some months ago we had Svein Olav on the buzz, charming individual, loads of laughs. You were on his team for a long time as COO of Nomor, one of the largest European pest control companies, which was ultimately sold to ServiceMaster. And when was that? The fall of 19?
19,
right?
exactly right.
Wow, time really flies, doesn't it?
It does.
So let's enlighten our listeners a little bit. When did you join Nomor? I mean, you came right out of the hospitality space, right? And went to Nomor, is that right?
More or less, yeah. I had a few years in Dubai. I was doing consultancy work for hospitality industry. Yep. So I got a call from, Robert, who also worked for Svein, who you know. And basically, listen, we need somebody to head up operations. And I, like this, I was there and straight into a WASP summer in 2010. Yep. And it was crazy. And I think, but it was such a great experience for myself and for Nomor and for the whole team.
No, but did you not have a dinner table discussion with your wife and you guys were like, pest control? Like, what is this? Like, are you sure you want to do this? Victoria, did you warn him or no?
Yeah. You were the one who said pest control. I'm not sure, right?
Yeah. I have some preconceptual ideas. I thought, listen, this is, could this be saying that? I mean, I had I think, our group of friends were probably the most, I don't know, upset, it's not the word, but they were like flabbergasted, like, what are you doing? Going from hospitality, nice properties. I said, listen, if you ever gone to a general manager's office in a hotel in Edinburgh, where I was a general manager, it's in the basement next to the beer kegs. There's a smell, it's a foul smell, it's damp. You're going to save the best space that you can sell to your clients, obviously. And, the people you work with is basically the same. They're great. I mean, the front line in hospitality and in pest control, they're great craftsmen. They know what they're doing. Most of the time they love it. They're hands-on. And so it's the difference is not so big. But I was, I had concerns, especially my first 6 months as well with Nomor, and getting into a company at that stage that wasn't really, up to standard.
This was the grand turnaround.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just,
there were all sorts of problems.
We had clients leaving us. I came straight into the biggest region. We had the worst hit by the wasp summer. There was no structure. It was kind of terrible, to be honest. It was a war zone. But we had a goal, and that was to fix it, and then to make it even better. And again, Victoria was talking about trust, and I think that's the key word. And I think I had a trust in Svein, Olav, and Robert, and the rest of the team, and it was also the other way around. We trusted each other, and we trust that we were going to make it.
Curious, Andreas, coming from the hospitality space into pest control, not a lot alike, right? Not a lot of glamour in pest control. What did that look like, bringing that customer service mentality and even leadership into pest control industry?
Yeah, so I think it's it's more similar than how we see it, and I think that we try to do a lot of customer service with Nomor. We saw that this is, I think the perception is that this is, typically the business where it's mainly men, it's big guys, big, hard, it's manly. And then we try to get some women to be in the front line. We try to do all of this stuff and try to, as a client, as an end customer, you need the empathy of the pest control technician to understand their problem, to how is it like. You don't need a robot coming in there and going like, okay, only to fix the problem. I mean, it's great if you know how to get rid of wasps or ants or termites, but you also need to see the customer service side. And what I experienced is that, a lot of the companies make a lot of commercial about their pest control businesses, but also, do you answer the phone? Do you answer the phone within 3 rings? Do you show up at the time you tell your client you're going to show up? Or you say, I'm going to be there during the day, and you make the client wait the whole time rather than giving them a time slot? Do you get a text message saying, listen, thank you for having us coming to your house. This is not included in your insurance or in the service. However, you can buy this from our platform or website. I mean, all of this is customer service that adds value to your company and also to the end client, the client themselves. I think that's what we saw quite quickly that hadn't been done in the north of Europe. It was like kind of a very basic service, like you have a lawn service. Somebody comes around, you don't have an idea when they're going to arrive. There's no pre or post photographs of the lawn. So we started all this, communication. What about pictures in the reports? And try to get, what does the end consumer or your client, what do they value? What do they want to see? They don't want to have a 50-page report of how many issues you have. You want to have an executive summary, and then if they want to read the rest, then they can read it. So we had a lot of those transformations being done that enhanced the value of the experience from our guys and girls. And I think also what we try to do is diversify. We had a lot of immigrants in Sweden. We try to get them on board, being able to speak, especially in the front desk, being able to speak Arabic or Spanish whenever they get a call in. And also, I know that we are translated all our information during my time into 9 different languages. I think there's a lot still to be done, and that can actually add value to your business. Talking about pest controllers, focusing on customer service.
Let's talk about competition.
Sure.
So that's Anti-CMEX's backyard been around a long time. You came in into No More as an underdog.
Yeah.
Well, what set it apart? And you talked about your really revenue-driven mentality.
Yeah. Exactly. We were really revenue driven. I have to say that, Anticimex, they started out in the 30s. It's a fantastic company. They're doing so well. And I think the last few years, the transformation has been amazing. However, I think that in Europe, and back 10 years ago, there was no competition. And we said we need competition in order for a market to be healthy. What we liked about No More and our culture was being in the underdog of the market. And I think that's what was one of the success factors for us. At least that's what we believe. And historically, in Sweden or Scandinavia, Anticimex had a more, well, they have to correct me if I'm wrong, but we say more cost-driven module where you have a more like an insurance where, okay, you pay up front 20,000 kroners and then we take care of your contract, and we try to be there as, obviously the scheduled routes, but then as little as possible. Where we might have a different approach where we're more revenue driven. We wanted our technicians to go out there, do their inspection, but also do add-on things. Can you enhance the service? And people say, well, that's selling. Well, if you enhance the service and if you add value to yourself and to the client, that's service and sales at the same time. And not overselling, not doing stuff that they don't need, but being, the expert that actually visits them. So I think our strategy was always very revenue driven.
Makes sense. I'm curious. It was a big turnaround, right? We heard in Svein Olav, the interview, coming in, short. It's going to be a struggle to make the first payroll. I'm wondering, when's the first time you turned to Victoria and said, "I need a little help," or help me with the situation?
Oh, that was way before, when we. That's why I married this lovely, not only for the looks, but also very smart. Yeah. Hey, listen, I had, I think the problem is when you, as Victoria said, when you start out and you're getting to be picked, being the person to lead a team, if it's a small team or not, you kind of, you want to be the perfect leader, but you have so much to learn. I think you can learn a lot from the different modules and literature that's out there, but you also have to experience some of the issues yourself. So no, we don't normally tend to bring the work home so much, but when I have issues, this is my speaking partner, and we discuss, how could this be done differently? Was this a good idea? And also a lot of times I hear, okay, how can you have done this differently? Yeah. And I think that's a good way to, you need to criticize yourself or put yourself on a, and kind of do that. Did I make the right decision?
Or what did I learn from it?
What I learned from it.
I think that's in life in general, to just take a pause once in a while and say like, okay, what happened in the past week or month or year, and what did I learn from this, and what are my key takeaways? And
what's the first thing that you had to help him with?
A memory comes to mind that actually he was, you remember you in Copenhagen, so we were in our late 20s. I mean, this was before kids, and you were attending a workshop with me for an entire week.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was probably the first time.
Yeah.
That was the only time we really worked in the same building.
Management at Hilton.
Yeah.
No, I think, typically we talk about, I think, as in pest control, if you do frontline, you got to have people with issues, people that they have they do something that, maybe not that turns into something negative, and then try to help them out of this. And then, without, coming home and, give ideas and help each other. And I think that's the key in any.
He's an awesome coach. I mean, you really do it well. I mean, everyone would love him. I when they were crying.
Thank you.
It's. I think it's. But it's all in the questions.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think that's what we did at Nomor, was to. I mean, you've seen the pictures, Paul. You've been to the parties that we had and the parties were for the employees, not to say this is how good we are. This is the managed team, because without the guys on the front line, we were not this successful. So it was always trying to pin them down and try to have them feel and see and experience what's in it for me, being part of Nomor.
Well, I think, from management presentations and all the discussions we have, even from Svein Olav's interview, I think one of the things that I remember distinctly about Nomor is that in the beginning, when you guys got together as a team, that the employees weren't even proud of the organization. Like they weren't even excited to be there. So it was a challenge for you as a management team to really create something that the employees are proud to be part of that team. So how did you guys do that? What was it like in the early years?
So we had I think the advantage that I say Svein Olav, Robert, and myself and the whole team, actually, we had a few of us had worked for larger corporations.
Yep.
And I think that's a good combination, having worked for larger corporations and then small companies, because that mix is great in the sense that we have been exposed to different incentives, mostly on the management side. But so we took those incentives and showed them to the front line, saying, listen, would you be interested in if we ran a competition like every fall and spring where, except for getting commission from all the sales, you can win trips, and we keep like on a weekly basis what you're doing, and doing all these kind of trips around the world. We went to see Barcelona FC play in Barcelona for extended weekend and all these great adventures. Firstly, we did it only for a selected, like the one person won, and they can bring their wife. And then we realized, hey, this is great, but there's no team building.
Yeah.
So then we changed around that to be, let's bring in at least 10 or 15 of the front line so we can take them all somewhere, climb a mountain or go to Barcelona and see a nice football game. The only way we're going to do it, we're going to bring them all together. So we had like 10, 15, I think at the end, like 30 people, and me chaperoning. That was hell, but hey. But
then he needed support when he got back.
But bringing all these guys and girls together and go off for an extended weekend to climb a mountain in Poland, that brings the team together, and it's such value added to the whole organization. It's just great.
You raise an extremely important topic in my mind. When I think about incentives, you've got long-term versus short-term, right? So the higher up in an organization somebody is, the more longer term you want the incentive to be. And then you have individual versus the group. Yeah. At some point, if it's too individualistic, it turns into a competition. It's not team building. On the other end of the spectrum, if it's too communal, then it kind of takes away individual performance. So at Nomor, how did you, was it trial and error trying to balance these, or was it the management team taking those incentive structures and experience from other organizations and bringing them in? How did you guys sort through that?
That's a good question. And I think it's both. I think it's all components that you mentioned. It was trial and error. I think the first trip with somebody won was to New York, and only one person from the company left. Everybody else was envious, going like, we were like, oh, this is fantastic. And then realized, okay, everybody's like envious and creating this bad feeling. And so it was a bit of trial and error, and then bringing in different components. I think we, eventually found a mix that was really good. I think, as you describe it, it needs to be, individual for bringing that kind of, inside the person itself, but then not too vague, and it can't be too communal as well. So it needs to be both. And we managed to get most of those components in there, which turned out really well. We liked it. We asked the team always, say, listen, where can we go now? What is a good incentive? Where should we travel? Would you like going out fishing in Norway, doing a fishing trip? You want to climb a mountain? You want to go on a bike race? Yep. And no, I think we found a good mix there. It's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work, setting together the whole trip, and monitoring the entire the point system and everything that we done. So, but we also had a philosophy that we're not going to spend money on marketing. This is the marketing we're going to do. That's going to be internal, and that's all the trips that we're going to offer our employees.
Victoria, I have a question for you. When I think about the manager of an organization, I think about a CEO, right? So what is the ultimate responsibility of a CEO? So he's setting strategy, thinking about the architecture of the business, like the organizational design, the incentive structures, like the routines, establishing culture. So clearly, as a leader's higher up within the organization, it's more of kind of a broader strategic outlook. But when you think about management and leadership training, you talk about first level managers, right? So that's a very different manager than somebody who's thinking about how do I design appropriate incentive structures. So how do you, in the course of your business and when you're working with different managers, how do you think about the role of a manager as it evolves over time? And I don't know if that's a fair question. It's just something popped into my mind.
It's a very good question, and it's a very important question, because I do think you were saying, like, okay, these are all the roles of the CEO and it's sort of, and culture, right? Yeah. For example, culture, extremely important. And I think many leaders sort of leave culture to chance. It's sort of, okay, every organization will have a culture, whether we like it or not, right? I do think there is a lot of benefit of thinking as a leader to say intentionally, what kind of culture do we want to have? And what am I actively doing to build and create that culture? So that's part of it.
How do you define that? So when you say, if I'm a leader of an organization, so how do I even answer the question, what are my options? Yeah. What do I want? Are you saying like a competitive culture versus, or what?
Yeah, and see, that's very good. About? Like, how do you define culture?
Right.
It's a very, and first of all, we know there's going to be a culture wherever we go, whether we
create it or
so
not. Right.
We exactly might be there. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to like starting in a new organization and discover it's a toxic culture, right? So we know what it is. And really, I heard someone describe culture once as it's what everyone is doing when no one is watching. So it's really not about like, oh, the nice poster with these are our values, and then no one is living them. But it's really, what is it that we're doing? How, for example, are we competitive? Are we revenue focused? How do we do leadership? Are we like, this way? Are we really listening and taking it? So that would all be part of the culture. It truly is in the DNA. It's what we're doing. However, it can be changed. It can be transformed, right? Another thing that I think, and as you said, yes, we wrote the book and I do work a lot with first level leaders. I do find that the CEO with the executive team very often underestimate the importance of really being leadership coaches. So very often when I work with senior executives, if they think about leadership, it might be about how they do leadership. But in reality, I'd like for them to think about, all right, how am I coaching all my managers so that they are, great leaders? And sometimes we think that just because we become so senior and we grow, that we should avoid sort of the basic, or we don't have to worry about that. But really, as a CEO, you need to be excellent at delivering feedback, for example, to your direct reports. And I use the example sometimes, and it's a former colleague of mine back in Sweden used to be a professional soccer player when he grew up. And so now he's a consultant and he works with leadership, and he has 2 teenage sons, or they used to be teenagers. They're a bit older now. And he was the coach for their soccer team, right? And the sons, they were a little bit like, hey, because they were getting pretty good. And they were like, Dad, we're just doing all this basic practice. And isn't it time for us to be a little bit more advanced? And, we're just working on these broadside kicks and things. And he was like, Then they had the opportunity to go to Italy, I think it was Milan, and see one of these like top soccer teams of the world, and to see them practice. So they're on the big arena and the stadium. All the stars are coming in on the playing field, and
they're all doing drills.
The boys go like, "Look, Dad! Now you can learn a little bit of nice techniques." The first thing that they're starting, exactly, it's like the basic drills, and I think. Going back to your point, yes, it's different, but it's not that different. Of course, their drills were like longer distance, sharper, and all of that. And I do think when it comes to leadership, don't underestimate the power of being a good leader, of being a good listener. Like I always tell leaders, like, if you want to have the best answers, you first need to ask the best questions. Like, and how do you set that culture? if you have a one-on-one with your direct report and you're not asking any questions, that leader likely will not go back necessarily and ask any questions of his or her employees or direct reports. And in turn, you'll have a culture in your organization that isn't really listening, that isn't hearing, that isn't picking up what's going on.
Victoria, I have a question. We have a scenario. Taking Paul's pest for a second. But if Paul and I are peers and we're technicians, Andreas is the boss, we'll still call it Paul's pest for royalty's sake. And he gets promoted to service manager. And all of a sudden we were best buds. We were hanging out on the weekends. Now he's my boss.
Yeah.
Okay. What does he need to watch out for or be ready for, right? Because now, I'm not saying you're going to get an ego over it. And then what's the relationship like? Like how can Andreas help coach Paul into that role?
That's such a brilliant question and very, very important because this happens all the time, right? And it puts all three of us in a difficult situation. So first of all, the support from Andreas is very important to set you up for success, right? And to do this. The most common mistake for the Pauls in that situation is that, oh my goodness, I got this promotion, so now I better prove that I'm worthy of it, right? Which means I need to act like this manager, and I need to know all the answers because now I'm the boss, right? So you're sort of expecting that I should know, and you're expecting but in reality, once you get into that situation, you need to be even better at listening and asking questions, not feeling that you have to have all the answers. But we know as soon as we get a little bit insecure in life in general, we get that urge that we need to prove that we are good for somewhere. And that's where the leader comes in at that point, where I'm talking about the leader also being the leadership coach. That's the moment where it's not like, hey, yes, good luck. And yes, go and have a meeting. But like, all right, hey, how did your meeting with Patrick go today? Like, what questions did you ask? Tell me, like, what did you find out? All right, good. So that's a critical point where I think many leaders are sort of just dumped in there. They're let in there. Maybe even this leader promoted you because he was so busy with other stuff that he just needed to put someone in the place. So he didn't really have time to give you that. And that's where we have that 12-year gap, right? Where it's like, okay, good luck, try it out if you still like it.
So if I were promoted to like a service manager and he and I are buds, how would Andreas coach me to deal with my former peers now?
Yeah.
So what's like, yay, I'm promoted, I'm the boss man. So what happens the next day when I go in? I mean, how do I communicate with Patrick, my friend, who we're drinking on the weekend? Now all of a sudden I'm checking Patrick's work.
Yeah. I see that's the point. Now you want to like, is that what you're going to do? Is that the aim and purpose of your situation? I would, yes. If I were Andreas, I would sit down with you and say like, all right, let's set this up. Like, how are you going to do this? All right, good. You're going to start with a one-on-one with your direct reports, right? Which is the scariest thing because you're like, oh my God, I don't want to talk to him on my own. I don't even know what to say, right? Well, the good news is you don't really need to do so much of the talking. You need to sit down and say like, all right, so this happened. I'm now the supervisor. You know, like in the next month or so, what are you expecting from me? What can I do? What's one thing that you think is working really well right now that we should just definitely keep? And what's something that you're like, hey, this has been frustrating me for some while. Can we stop doing that? Or can I start? Like, I would coach you
to listen,
to really listen, but also to prepare a little bit and set up those formal interactions. Because usually those are the ones that could be a little bit scary and we tend to then avoid them. But really go in, not with the answers, but with the good questions and then start to see, all right. I would also encourage you to find some quick short-term wins. Like what's something little, because you probably know, because you've also been in, that's been frustrating. That
my wife needs this advice. She needs to listen more and yell less. Like, for sure.
Notice how quiet I am right now.
But this makes perfect sense. Actually, you really laid this out well. This is very clear.
In this similar scenario, sorry to make y'all guinea pigs for this. Victoria, you're right about the one-on-ones, which is a different concept. And y'all talked earlier about the empathy factor. And it is more of an emotional connection. It's not like, hey, you're not showing up at 8, you're not showing up at time at 9, right? And that relationship, it's a lot more coaching and emotions. And this is not an emotional, this is very, right. You almost did it like, hey, you're the manager now. This is a rough, tough, get dirty industry. What do one-on-ones look like in the pest control and service industry? Number one. Number two, time is money. So if he keeps me in the field servicing, like we're all gonna be punished by pulling me out of the field 30 minutes a week or bi-weekly.
So I think that's a very relevant question, and a question I get often, like, oh, that's probably great, right? Like that we should have it, but that's going to cost us way too much. That's not going to happen. So usually what we start to work on is, right, why do we have one-on-ones? Like, what's the purpose? Very often, many leaders think of, oh, it's like for me, the leader, to sort of check in, how's everything going? Like, and I've been guilty of having many of those one-on-ones in my career as well, which is like, hey, what did you do last week? What's happening now? Okay, perfect. Yes, great. Right? They may have been really friendly and nice, but where we really want everyone to rethink about is, okay, this is my chance in this sort of busy everyday, just what you're saying, everyone's out on the field, I don't see what's going on, to really help and understand my team and help him or her to raise the engagement, right? So to be engaged for what is it that we do? Because going back to your point, that the service that we're providing, how we go out and meet the client, really also depends on how engaged do we feel for the organization. So when I work with leaders, I usually start out by creating that business case. What's your business going to look like if you have engaged team members versus non-engaged? Like, literally, bottom line, what difference? And I think it's important to start out there and then say, all right, the purpose really, why we do one-on-ones is it's that moment to help raise that engagement. And then if you know that as a leader, you go in and like, oh, maybe I should do my one-on-one differently. And it's then thinking of it might not feel so productive, and it might feel like I'm stealing 30 hours that could have been billable hours out on the field, to really just listening and asking these questions. But then I go back to that engagement business case we just created and say like, all right, but that's what you were doing. So I think that is the mindset of the leader, and to really see like, all right, I'm really doing this for the individual, but also for our organization. It makes business sense.
On that, Andreas, at Nomor, that level of engagement, that's one of the lines that stuck out. It's that leaders can't create the level of engagement of their employees, but they can create the environment. So taking that to COO, what did that look like? Like, how can you influence the environment?
Well, you can do it a fair amount, for sure. And I think we have, Sweden is special in itself because we have by law that you need to do the one-on-ones. That's it, because we have a collective union in Sweden. Okay. So all different industries have a collective union. And one of the really good stuff that comes out of that is that you need to have a one-on-one annually with all the employees. Doesn't matter who you are. Mm-hmm. So, we did that, obviously, and we stretched it even further. So we wanted to, obviously, have everybody engaged. I think we're going back to the, what we talked about before, looking at the competencies of the managers and the branch managers. We also talked about how do we communicate, how do we get everything out? Because that was one of the biggest hurdles for me as a COO, is that, in a hotel, you're in a hotel and you have a meeting, takes 15 minutes, then you get the word across, and then that was it. Here you have 26 different offices, 8 different regions, where you have to, get that cascaded all the way out, or and vice versa, all the information. So we had a very structured approach when it came to meetings, and obviously virtual or by phone, but very structured and not taking too much time. But we did a lot of one-on-ones. We did a lot of team activities, but also, one-on-ones are the crucial factors. I think also, and one of the one-on-ones, what I liked is to celebrate success, to tell somebody one day have done a good job, and not like in the corridor or in the car, like, oh, that was such great, like, you did perfect.
Yep.
Sit them down. The more formal the environment is, the kind of a higher frequency, or it's going to be more amplified if it's in a structured, environment. So if you sit down and you tell them, Franklin, this is what I see you do there, and this is how the way you did it, and kind of almost like a paraphrasing each movement that they did, and tell them this is what I want to have you do all the time, and let them know, because I think that today we all have this is your SOPs and this is your contract. We expect you to see our clients, go out, be friendly, and do the pest control, and then right to the next client.
Yep.
But then how do you know, as like any employee in your organization, how do you know when you had a really good day and that you added value to the company? And you need to understand this, because otherwise you will have employees just running around like crazy, thinking that they're so busy, they're doing great, but they're not. Yeah. So I think that's the lesson that we learned. You have to be very specific in, what's a good day for you? What is your assignment? When can we say you did a really good day? And if you understand that, that's great. And then you need to celebrate it, of course.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Thank you. Victoria, another question. Mm-hmm. And this one stuck out as well. So my partner, Bobby, I remember having this meeting 8 or 9 years ago. I remember we brought in one of the presidents of one of the neighborly brands. So the old Dwyer Group, it's a franchise organization, large franchise. I'm sure y'all are aware. Bring him in, and he's helping teach us, like running this big corporation, franchises. Hey, you should, if you want to deliver bad news, the secret is doing this, like Oreo sandwich is what he called it, right? Good news, bad news, good news. And I've functioned in that way for a long time. And in here, I picked up like that's probably doing a disservice, isn't it?
Well, it's one of these old classics on how to deliver feedback, like the sandwich or the hamburger method, and lots of different names. And the challenge, I think, with it is that it's so commonly used that people are like, oh, you're telling me something good now, so I'm just not really listening because I'm waiting for the but and the bad news. So I do think, to your point, to really make sure that you have moments where you're just really focusing on what you saw that worked really well and the impact that had. So I think don't save it and just sit down and okay, now I'm going to have that structured. I do think, I feel very passionate for the art of giving feedback, because there's so many people that it makes us feel so uncomfortable to give it, especially when it's bad news. And again, to your point, it goes up to senior executives who are like, oh, I don't really like doing that, right? And so again, it's a skill that we can learn and think about our intention. Why am I doing this? It's really to help this person.
So how can we learn those things? Or how can we all get better at giving direct feedback?
I can coach you.
Yeah. Or I just watch my wife as an example. She gives me bad.
No, but I do think that it's just like going back to defining skills, right? It's a skill, and I don't think we should shy away from being prepared. Very often, if I'm going to have a feedback conversation with one of my direct reports, and I know that there will be that this is going to be hard, right? Yeah. I am really well prepared. And when I say well prepared, I know I've asked myself, why am I giving this feedback? Mm-hmm. I always say, ask yourself, what's your intention? Share your intention with your employee. But before I go in the conversation, what I've done is I've really gathered a collection of behaviors. So what is it that I've seen that wasn't working well? And this behavior, because that's it. It's not like, oh, you're always late, or really you're not very service-minded, or, you're just talking over everyone in the meetings all the time, or whatever it is that it might be not working. Look at the specific. Hey, all right, so now in the past weekly meetings, I've noticed that when so-and-so starts talking, you've actually interrupted 3 times in a row. Or, when you go out and visited the client and I saw we got this, so really be very specific. And I usually say, if you can't write it down, beforehand for yourself, you're not specific enough, because then it's sort of like vague. Then think about what's the impact of that behavior. Like if this is going to continue to happen, what's the consequences? Or maybe people will not really listen to you in the meetings any longer, or we might get bad scores, or whatever it is. And again, the impact is what I say is it's where you sell the behavioral change. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you give feedback because you've noticed something that, or it's something that you want to amplify and you want to see more of, or it's something that like, this is not going to help this person. Right. It's not going to help. But have you ever tried to change a behavior?
I try to change it every day.
right. It's not super easy. So I think you want to identify the behavior, but you also want to identify what's the impact of that. And that's where you sell the behavioral change. So those are the steps. And those have them written down before you go into the conversation. And then the part where I then also really look with leaders is before you sort of, here I am, I prepared and I'm going to tell you all of this. Start out by asking, like, hey, I'd like to talk about the meeting yesterday. Patrick, how did you think it went? Right? And that's like, it's starting out with that point. And then why do you think that's a good idea to start out asking instead of saying, sorry, now the coach wake up in me. But what do you think? Why is it a good idea for us to start asking rather than just coming in with our prepared
maybe
list?
we seem like we're condemning the person as opposed to starting the dialogue, right? Making it comfortable to
So we're creating trust. We're creating a dialogue. What else?
A feedback loop.
Yeah.
Make sure that they understood. Like it said, whatever you said yesterday, well, it was understood, and hey, we verbalized it. You can clearly recommunicate.
Are you trying to see if we ourselves recognize what we're doing is wrong?
Yeah. So this is really like, so all of the things that you said, they're absolutely right and correct. But as a bonus, it gives you, so here you are, you're a bit uncomfortable about giving this feedback and you're like, okay, I'm going to give it. Now you know, is this a blind spot for the person? Will the person go, oh yeah, I think the meeting went great. Or like, oh yeah, I'm great at service. It's my, whoa.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, I did notice I kept interrupting him, or like, no, actually, I just had this bad news happening before. Or so it gives you like, here you are with your list, but maybe the person now just told you himself or herself, like, yeah, these are the things. Yeah. And see what a different conversation that will be. And versus if they have a complete blind spot, you'll be, okay, so now I need to be even more detailed in my examples. And then the final part, when we sort of tie it all together, where even if you're sort of getting great at that and sort of you're following these steps, it's agree on action. So, I mean, because if it's something that needs to be changed, very often we're like, okay, so we all assume, right, that go out and do it, but just stop there for a moment and say, all right, so next meeting, what are we going to do differently? Or when you go out and see that client tomorrow, tell me, like, and again, ask the questions. So even when we are giving feedback, ideally we should do the least talking. It's all in the questions.
You spoke about change and probably smaller levels, one-to-one, right? Direct report, taking change. We'll see how you do here. There's a test here. Chapter 5 is about change, right? Chapter 5, all right? And thinking about the Nomor and the private equity coming in about five years into that 10-year stretch or so, or 9-year stretch, that definitely would have shocked frontline employees. Like, oh, something's changing, right? Private equity, what's going on? We're getting into Norway, and a couple years later, all of that, maybe not knowing the final end in sight, and you're just helping guide them there. What does change look like? Communicating that down so you don't have a bunch of like frontline people that are just working in fear every day.
I think I think you're spot on. It's essential. I think we were very clear every time something happened, but you never start something before it's signed and sealed. And then it was a very clear way of getting those new news or messages out in the organization, where we called everybody. We had it started with the management team and then the branch managers and all the front lines I think we did it in such a way that the way we conveyed the message was more like, okay, the more we build, the more secure the environment and our workplace is going to be. And I think we conveyed it in such a way, and this is also the help of Svein, Olav, and the way how he, was so relaxed about it. It actually turned into, more taking away the anxiety, and for our guys and girls to be more proud of the company. Oh, we're now the fourth largest company in Europe when it comes to pest control. And I think that's a skill itself. But I think we always had a very clear plan, always how to communicate these kind of news. And I think that's essential for any organization.
Well, what kind of things were you watching for from the front line to make sure no one pushed back against that change?
I think each branch, that each branch needed to have at least one weekly meeting with all the guys and girls for that specific branch, just to make sure that we've got all the feedback, and we actually had a plan where you need to feedback the minutes from that meeting centrally to make sure that it actually happened. Because again, you're not in a hotel, you got 26 offices, you want to make sure it happens everywhere, and that you follow our processes, procedures, our culture, because this is for us, the weekly meetings enhance the culture of our company, because it was an open workplace. Everybody could ask questions, and it was also a forum for getting information out and getting information from the technicians saying, listen, this is a procedure that I don't like, or I got some issues with this, I want to. So it's a forum. And I think that's where we, told everybody, this is what you need to convey. This is the message. And if you get questions that you as a manager of that branch can't answer, then feed them back to us and we will help you. And also what I think we did very well, what I, together with Svein, Olav and Jacob, we visited all of the branches. You go out there and you need to be visible. If you got 26 offices, you need to be visible. I think today you can do it also with video messages and but I think it's important for any organization that you're visual and out there speaking to your guys and girls in all the different branches. It's a lot of work. I mean, a lot of traveling. Sweden is a vast country, but we did it.
Now in this whole COVID world, we're virtual on a lot of things. And I used to make 60 transatlantic flights per year, and I hated it. And so the one, a lot of people suffered in COVID. The one silver lining for me is I wasn't on a plane all the time, and I loved it. I'm almost not particularly excited about going back to the old style of life. But Victoria, what are you seeing, and as you talk to your colleagues globally, I mean, clearly we're more in a virtual world now. Do you feel like this is changing the way that we'll do business even after things open up?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, it's like we've all been part of the world's largest remote work experiment in a sense. So, I mean, if you just look at America, before COVID, about 5% of the workforce worked from home. During COVID, 60% of the workforce worked from home. And now the challenge is that many people, just like you and me,
want to go back.
They're the same, because we're like, I don't particularly, this was pretty good, right? And I was talking to our friend and then neighbor, it's like, I like having breakfast at home in the morning. It's much nicer than I thought. I haven't done that in the past 20 years because I'm traveling all the time. So right now we're sort of looking into the new way of working, the hybrid workforce. And the challenge is, and I get asked this a lot, how do we make that happen? Because we don't have really that much research on that. We can't really look at that. But what we do know is that people don't want to go way back to the way it was before. So, but also they don't necessarily want to do so now it's a trick, I think. I think we're in a very exciting time period, because now it's how do we make the best out of those two worlds? What have we learned from this year working remotely, doing things differently? And what is it that we've missed from the past? And how do we merge that together and find... So really, we're finding ourselves in a new form of change again.
Yeah, I mean, this morning I had a due diligence meeting, and it was one of the first ones we've done in person.
Yeah.
And the acquirer has hired a lot of people over the last 18 months. And so I've been working with these people for for the last year, virtually. I've met them.
Yes.
So it was a weird experience because like on the one hand, you feel like you really know them, but then you never met them in person. So it was weird this morning actually to finally meet some of these people in person. And they're clearly, I think it's demonstrated we could definitely do a lot more virtually. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, like I do think that in person is important.
Yeah.
So
Sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I had a similar experience with someone I worked with for a year.
Yeah.
And finally we were meeting in person, and it was interesting because the meeting itself, like the formal part of the meeting, could just as well have been done virtually.
Online, yeah.
But then we went for coffee because between the meeting schedule, we're like, oh, we have 20 minutes of free time. Let's go and grab a coffee. And during that conversation, we really sold some great stuff because that impromptu discussion. And I think that's what we are. We need to find that balance.
You raise a good point because you're not going to have the same sort of banter online as you would. Like if we're having a cup of coffee right now, we're talking, hey, look at this guy and this and blah. You learn things about people that you would not do virtually because it's more formal. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, also the COVID, it also leads to innovations. It's like typical ban in Europe with the pesticides. A lot of pesticides were banned and suddenly you have to be innovative.
Yeah.
Oh, what can we do against bedbugs? Oh, heat treatments. Mm-hmm. And so I experienced this firsthand in Sweden when we were moving. We sold our house, moving here permanently to the States. And I was waiting for these guys to come and estimate, how much, the whole house is going to be to move to the States. Mm-hmm. They're not going to come around because it's COVID. So they send me a link and I go around with my phone and show each room exactly what we're going to bring. And 5 hours later, I got an offer from them. And I think this is, so this is what we can learn from different industries. Yeah. Think about the pest control industry. I mean, there must be so many redundant drives. Yes. The first time out, I think I got bitten, so can you come and have a technician coming out? You drive for a few miles. You wasted like 2 hours from a pest control technician going out there looking for something they can't find, rather than to make inspections virtually. I mean, not for everything, but you can probably take away some redundant factors. I think this is now in Sweden you want to make an appointment with a doctor, you go online.
Yeah. Sure.
So it's I think it also some kind of innovation is in there when we get to when we can't follow our normal procedures. I think that's good. However, I want to get this, bloody pandemic away from here as soon as possible. But it can also bring some good, actually.
A couple more questions for the two of you popping in mind. Victoria, in addition to picking up this book, what are some, if I'm a manager and I really I might not have any formal training in management whatsoever. I'm an entrepreneur. Next thing I know, I got 50 team members that I'm responsible for. What are some of the things that, I think there's so many options out there to educate yourself. People don't even know where to start. So if I really am serious about learning myself, what are some things I can do? I could pick up some books and I could read, but what are training programs or what would you suggest where can I start?
So I do think picking up a book might be a great idea, or it might not, because sometimes we're so busy, we don't feel like we have the time to sit down. Mm-hmm. I would say get in touch with Franklin Covey.
Okay.
Because there's so many different ways of getting that support from a professional. But what I would really encourage everyone is keep learning, right? I feel very passionate for that. Sometimes we're like, okay, I know my stuff, but things, going back to the idea of change, keeps changing. So what was my stuff 5 years ago is not necessarily the stuff today. So wherever you are, just challenge yourself, learn new things, to try out new things, test new things, be curious, go out and ask questions. I think that's key. Listen to other people. I love the idea of what you were creating. Patrick told me a little bit about it before. Bring people together. Let them ask each other questions. What can we learn? Maybe it's not even the same industry, but how are you doing? Like you're saying, okay, look at that moving industry. So I think be curious, ask questions. Do invest in reading. I mean, there's some really good books. One of my favorite books from this year is Adam Grant, Think Again, which is really it talks about learning, but it also talks about unlearning. So facts that have been to one of our biggest challenges is to unlearn. But then, just like you would in another skill, take time to master it. If you want to become a better manager, spend some time preparing and doing it. And by all means, get a coach or get someone to come into your organization and help you, give your team a few sort of guidelines. We usually say when we come in, it's not like, this is how to do it. But listen, here you have a framework that you can use to get the most out of your business and your organization.
So talk to me a little bit about Franklin Covey. So if I came to the organization and I said, okay, I've got a disaster on my hands, what happens? What's the next step? How does it all work?
So you do speak with the client partner who will really listen and try to understand what is actually happening in your organization, because we have a vast, like so many different programs. And it really is like, what is happening? What is it that you really need help with?
Okay.
Very often someone can come, my leaders need to do this, or we need this. But we'll ask all these questions to see, maybe it's something that we can't just see. Maybe it's more the symptom that we see, but we need to go a little bit deeper. So we'll help you with that. That's what we do. We'll bring in a consultant depending on where you are and what kind of organization. So as I said, we have several, many consultants. So it would be maybe someone like myself that would then come in and ask even more questions and start sort of a partnership. And sometimes we'll say, some organizations will say, okay, we'll want to have this course. But more often what we see is, just as I said, we've also transformed. It's not the way it used to be 10 years, you bought a course and that's it. But you sort of get a membership, which is, I liken it to a membership of a gym, right? It's not that you just need to do spinning. Actually, we need to do a little bit of yoga too, right? We need to do some strength, and how do we make that? So we can tailor make exactly what it is that your organization need. And the good thing is, it's actually not that costly anymore. Just like it's not that costly to buy music, today. It's the same with training. There's so many good tools. You can do some live in person. You can do some live, but online. We do a lot of that, obviously, in the past year. But you can also use some of the tools and just do it yourself and use it for your organization.
What size organizations do you folks work with?
All kinds.
Okay.
That's amazing. Like I was mentioning, next week I'm getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning to do a workshop for Asia Europe. Like it's a large international client, and I work with all of them globally. But we also work with small organizations with maybe 20 employees that really want to set their culture. So really from very small to very large.
Cool.
Yeah. Yes, that is cool.
That is interesting.
Couple questions about management. If sitting like a fly on the wall, and I know we've had a fly around here for a second.
Because we are in pest control.
If you're brought into a meeting and you're watching like Paul and Andreas and me sit in a room, and you're sitting next to the CEO, and he's like, I need you to identify the next leader in my organization, my next service manager, or someone to take my place as CEO. What are you looking for? If you could just, what is it? Is there, what's the X factor?
Well, first of all, I probably wouldn't pick it up from just attending a meeting. Like people can say very smart things in meetings and look very well behaved. I used to tell leaders in Dubai, for example, where I was in charge of the leadership development, we would have 40 different restaurants. And I always told the restaurant managers, the way I check out your leadership style is to go to your restaurant on your day off. And I want to see, how's your restaurant run when you're not there, right? Like what procedures did you set in place? How did you build trust? How did you create so I think that's one thing I would really look for. And to where we started out this conversation with your friend who got he had a great idea, that CEO, checking it how's my frontline people actually doing? So I would investigate a little bit around that without doing it exactly that way. I think that's important. And then again, asking a lot of questions. Very often, if we start to really ask and talk about what is it that excites you, what is it that we need? What is it that this organization needs at this point? Is it someone to maintain? Is it someone to grow and take us to the next level? It will require slightly different leadership skills.
Yeah. Well, thank you. question about productivity, which I think was like time and energy management.
Yeah.
I heard you mention yoga a second ago. That's the thing. I think to me, a rewarding day is looking back on the day and like accomplishing much.
Yeah.
I think the older I get, the more I realize the most precious asset is time.
Yeah.
And just I've put more value on that over the years. And I'm always thinking about productivity tools or scheduling a day or an ongoing, never-ending to-do list. Help me. Where do I start?
First of all, I think managing our time and energy as something we've looked at, like, okay, you individual contribute, you arrange that you fix that for yourself. I do think that is going to be one of the most important leadership competencies of the future, because time and our energy management is going to be our most important resources. That we won't need. I mean, they say that, 75% of the jobs will be replaced by artificial intelligence within the next 15 years, the way as we see them today. So what is it that we need? We need our brain. We need our emotional ability, our way to read clients. And to do that well, you need to be well rested, focused, and use your time well. Mm-hmm. So that's why we need to do it. And the reason I say it first is because very many leaders, we tend to say like, oh, it's kind of like a reward. I do it when I've done all my other stuff. Maybe then I'll have a little bit of time for myself. I'd like to turn it around and say, how are you investing in your time and energy management so that you can make smarter decisions, so you can be a better leader and more strategic? Simply put, it's really, first of all, do your weekly planning. So many leaders tell me, they're like, oh yeah, I do weekly. I ask. And then I say, so what day of the week do you do your weekly planning? Oh, every day. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's sort of a weekly check-in. I'd recommend every person, leader or not, to sit down once a week and just look at the next week and say, hey, what's my most important goals next week? What is it that I want to achieve? Look at your roles. So we have dad, we have partner, we have a business leader, we have people leader, not necessarily the same thing, and say like, what is it that I want to accomplish next week in these different roles? Very often when I look at an executive person's agenda, it will only be their meetings in there. And it will look like fairly okay, but it's just meetings. But really, I want you to put in your work time, right? What are you actually going to do? When are you going to plan that super important meeting? That needs to go in there. Your plan should reflect what it actually looks like. In that, make sure that you also plan for moments of small breaks. And that is one of the advantages also of actually working from home now. And I say, have a little bit of a walk before you go into that important meeting where you need to be fully focused. Not after as a sort of a relief, but before, to get a sort of a... So I think that's really important, and see, how do you use your time? Sometimes I ask leaders to draw, like, how does my energy look like throughout the day? What's my typical dips? And what am I doing to make a difference? We know that there are certain energy drivers. Yes, I mentioned yoga. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm also a running coach, right? Those are things that we want you to do to be stronger, to be better. It's not a reward. It's something that actually, it's an investment, I'd say. So make sure you get those things, that you eat right, that you move, have a standing desk. If you every time you sit down for 4 hours without moving, we're not getting to 4 hours yet, but we shorten our life with 11 minutes. So you don't want to do that, right? And even like as a leader, get walk and talks in there, right? And do these things that takes you out from just sitting there in front of your computer.
That's really helpful. Thank you. What I really appreciate this book, it was different for me, because most books, it's a lot of theory, and it doesn't really give action steps. And this was all about application throughout, like during the chapter, at the end of the chapter, at the end of the book. It's like, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do next? Like, start now. And it didn't just say take a break before you continue the next chapter. There's places to fill in. It's not quite a workbook. I don't want to call it that, But I mean, I can see where it can really make a big change, and I hope for just the service industry that they take this seriously. I mean, it happens all the time. Like, hey, congrats, you're the new boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good luck. Call me for anything.
we have so many clients from the service industry. Really, because we also have a workshop based on the book that we've created. So they really appreciate it.
I recommend it, Andreas. You should read it.
Yeah, hey. It's a great book.
You knew I was going to put you on the spotlight.
I knew it.
Well, we really appreciate it. I mean, this is a wonderful conversation. I could talk to her for hours. You got so much stuff to say. So thank you both for coming. And welcome to America. I know life is tough as an immigrant. You guys will struggle. But we appreciate you coming.
Very happy to be both here and in America. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
First and foremost, if you're going to sell your business, you want the best people to sell your business. Potomac, 100%. I mean, they knocked it out of the park. I mean, I get to golf, I get to enjoy my life, and I get to forget about pest control because of them. I found Paul in 2015. I was reading an article in PCT magazine that he had written. I ended up calling him up. He called me back, and that's where it all started. When you're speaking to somebody of their caliber and they're telling you what they can do for you and they're walking you through the process, it just makes you feel really comfortable. And they know what they're talking about. They make you feel very secure in the decisions you're making because you know they're making the right decisions in the background. You know, dealing with somebody like me, I mean, I give them all the credit in the world for dealing with me because I'm a pain in the ass. You can ask my wife. I'm a big pain in the ass. And these guys, they were total troopers. I mean, Paul, the Max, Erica, all the way through, they walked me through this. It was seamless. It was actually easy. The numbers they told me that they were going to get, they got. And it was 3 times as much as the other companies offered.
Yeah, finished result just a couple weeks ago. So what is it like? Was the experience what you imagined?
Absolutely. It's you wake up in the morning and you forget about the business. It's been amazing. Being self-employed, you have to wake up 24/7. That's on your mind. You go to bed, it's on your mind. Now that it's sold and gone and you got the money in the bank, just the biggest relief. It's just like opening a new chapter. Something, you know, if you want to do something, you can do it right now without having to think about the business.
Did you ever feel like you were treated like a quote unquote smaller business?
No, not at all. I mean, they treated me like a superstar from beginning to end, all the way through. If I made a phone call, it was answered. If it wasn't answered, I had a call back within 15, 20 minutes. I was treated like a $50 million company. And that was amazing that they were treating me that way because they're the big dogs in the game for brokering pest control deals. And I'm glad they worked with me because I'm on the smaller side of the scale.
Thinking back, I mean, you're in your mid-40s. Like, did you ever imagine that you'd be able to, you know, enter and exit the pest control business and have this opportunity for you and your family?
Never in my life. And if it weren't for Potomac, it would have never happened because nobody could have gotten the number that they got. It wouldn't have happened. And no, I still pinch myself, and I'm really excited about it. I started the business with $6,000, came full circle, and made lots of money along the way. And then I sold for an amazing amount of money, and that wouldn't have happened without Potomac.